from here. Yeah, so first of all, welcome. I really appreciate you jumping on. I think it's good that I give you a background about myself first, and then happy to dive in about you. First of all, I've come from a bit of a weird lure fishing background, to say the least. I got into it, going down to the beach with family members and family friends, and literally casting little 5-gram sidewinders at the sea for months and months every night, and not having a single bit of luck. And the fun part was I enjoyed every one of those little sessions. The excitement being there that there could be something on the end of it. There could be, the opportunities there for something to come up and hit is what kept me going back, and what, I caught the bug over. We used to have a little kind of place we could stay down in Devon, which meant I was able to do a lot of sea fishing at a young age. And that's where I caught the bug for lure fishing.
I see, yeah.
But, I'm a Bristol-based angler. So as you can imagine, there is not much sea round by me that's clear enough to chuck a lure.
I can imagine that, yeah.
It's bleak, to say the least. It's really quite, it's just quite a shame, I'm in a place where, the nearest bit of sea water I could put a lure into would be, the marinas up at Porter's Head. You probably never heard of them because there's no one even talking about them holding bass or anything. It's really quite a limited places I can go from here. So a lot of, what I do now in terms of sea fishing is a 2-hour drive down to who knows where, try to pick up spots quite a bit and just try and get out there as much as possible. But as you can imagine, it's quite difficult for someone based where I am. I feel like that's a challenge a lot of people face.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I suppose I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum, being down in far west Cornwall. I'm half an hour away from Land's End, which means I can take me about 20 minutes to get from north coast to south coast as well. And it gives me a huge amount of variety of spots, conditions. And as long as there's not been such a big swell, the clarity is pretty much bang on throughout the season as well. It's very rare, we get problems with weed coming in, and that will kind of cool off a few spots. But no, I really realise I'm very lucky to live where I live, and I know a few of the bass anglers in Devon, lucky to have the same sort of thing. But I just really think in Cornwall, we have bass species year round, and I find there's pretty much, it does slow down over the winter, but we've got enough sport here to keep people interested, definitely year round. It's just, the swell picks up a bit in the winter, but I'm out fishing during the season every other day. It takes me about, say 20 minutes to get to a spot.
Yeah, you really are very lucky. You've got a cracking location right on your doorstep, pretty much. So it's just such a good place to be based for bass angling, to say the least. Up here we've got a lot of good freshwater sport, but in terms of sea fishing, there's not much of it. But what was your kind of background? When did you kind of get into it? What age? And what was the kind of starting off of your kind of fishing career look like? Where did you go from?
Yeah, well, when I was probably about, I don't know, less than 10 years old, I used to get dropped off where I used to live at the village kind of pond sort of thing, and I'd sit there, catch roach on a float and things like that, and just catch them, put them in a little keep net, and I was just same sort of thing. I was just fascinated by it, so I'd sit there for kind of hours on end till my mum came and picked me up again, and then after that I actually left fishing for quite a while, until basically just started trying to pick up an interest in sea fishing. But I was just like anyone, kind of a bit staggered about the scale of sea fishing. Going in a small pond in the village where you live is different to kind of looking out at the Atlantic and thinking how you go about catching anything, really. So similar sort of thing. I just used to throw out, just running ledger rigs and stuff like that with an old frozen sand eel on, and hope for the best. And eventually I started catching, caught, I think the first thing I caught was a place off a pier down in St Ives, and I was ecstatic after that. And then went on to kind of just feathering and stuff for mackerel, and I think after caught a pollock and stuff like that, that's when I really started getting into saltwater lure fishing, and that was probably a good 6-7 years ago now. And yeah, after that, you just, what's the most elusive, prize winning fish that we have in our waters, really, that you want to lure fish for? And that's just going after bass. And of course, you catch one or two of those, and you're instantly, it's a
There's no
terrible
coming
pump, but
back.
you're hooked.
There's no coming
That's
back.
it.
Yeah, it's a proper bug. You capture it. Funny enough, I bumped into this. I was fishing down on my local canal, and a little boy walked up to me with his family. He was probably under 10 years old, and he was fascinated. And his mum was like, "Oh, he's just got into fishing." And I just said to him, I was like, oh, "It's just to start, like, just to look at someone at that age and just think you're just about to catch the bugs.
That's it.
You haven't even broke the surface of how deep it goes and how kind of fun it gets. It's one
Yeah,
of
I
those
completely. I've taken a few of my friends that just haven't been fishing before, and as you get more confident, you can, on some trips during the day, we can guarantee that they're going to catch a fish. So, and then you see that, just if it's a kid or if it's someone who's older, like adults, just catching your first fish. People's eyes go wide, don't they? And yeah, I think people kind of, yeah, it's a really good way for people to get involved in it.
definitely. I absolutely love it, and I always encourage it. Everyone I've brought into it and tried out, I think they've had a positive experience with it, and it really kind of overcomes that kind of preconception where it's this cruel sport and it's all about taking it home. And when you take someone out and you give them the experience of catching and putting something back into the water and understanding that it's not this cruel, harsh sport, and once they've experienced that, I think it completely just blows the preconception out the water, and it gets so many people hooked on the sport. It's lovely to see though, man. Like, it's really nice to see, and it's sometimes a shame when you head down to your a spot near you and you see a couple anglers there, and you're like, oh god, like it's been there's some people here now, but it's nice to see, and I really love it, and I think it's one of those sports that we're going to be everyone, it's going to be taken up in popularity, especially
Oh,
lurking.
yeah, definitely. It's I think it's changed massively since what I say, like 7 years ago, getting into it. Seriously, it's changed massively. The way that I used to watch, Henry Gilby and stuff like that, the fishing programs and stuff, where it was just basic spinning for pollock and plugs and stuff like that. It just started coming around, and all the plugs from America and that. And the way that lure fishing now is going, nighttime fishing for bass, it's just modernized. All the gear's getting a lot lighter, easier to carry. Personally, I travel like incredibly light, and I carry the bare minimum so I can just keep moving and keep going. And I think it's ever changing as a sport. We're kind of taking it to different places, and the way that we feel about releasing the fish, the appreciation we have for the fish and the environments that we fish in. It's I think there's kind of a change in general, in the way that people are thinking kind of towards the environment and being out in it. So yeah, it's a really strong kind of thing to push forward. And I do just strictly catch and release unless the fish isn't going to go back, unless it's a poor hook or anything like that. It's always going back. And yeah, I love doing that. And people just love, if they didn't want to do the sport because, like you said, they think it was cruel initially, the fact that you can do clean catch and releases now, it gets even more people into it, which is brilliant.
Definitely. Yeah, you touched the surface then on traveling lightly. I think it's kind of overseen when you think about going for a big bass trip, especially from people down my ways. You don't really think about heading down with one rod and a light bag, because you want to have as much option as possible. You want to be able to put a bait out because you don't know what the conditions going to be like when you get down there. And it's definitely, traveling light is just a huge part of the whole planning for a kind of bass trip. And how crucial would you say it is? Because there's a whole thing where you want to be changing different spots and trying different areas, but at the same time, I might be wrong, but isn't a lot of sea fishing kind of fixed on a mark that is good and kind of waiting for the bass to come into that spot? What's your kind of opinion on that?
Well, I suppose there's a few ways that you can go about it that people are thinking, that you could either perch yourself on one headland, say, and you could cast 180 degrees to the water, and you could repeat that in hoping that the fish will come to you, hoping that you've read the tides right, and the food's going to be washing under your feet, and you're going to be catching them there. I personally, I've gone out fishing with lads who take three rods, and they take all their kit with them. And no problem with that at all. You know, certainly if you're fishing with bait and everything like that, it's a different ball game. You know, you've got to pack up and head out. But for me, that was never my style of fishing. So I pack. You know, I think I have probably about 10 lures in my box, all tried and tested. And yeah, I just head out with my VHF radio, my life jacket, you know, waders on and everything like that. And I'm up for, you know, I might stay in one spot. You know, if I think that the bass are on and I'm confident in it, that's what I'll do. But most of the time, I'm walking probably 1.5 to 2 miles, just along the cliffs, along the coast, and just kind of dipping in and out of spots, really.
Cool. Yeah, no, I think that's definitely a skill to have as well, to be, you know, kind of versatile in your kind of strategy going forward. I know I'm the same. When I'm doing a lot of freshwater stuff, it's a lot about finding the fish, and I feel like it's it's something that I've picked up on, with kind of, you know, trying to learn bass angling from an online point of view. There's no real clarity on, you know, how to go about it. What are you meant to be chasing a fish? Are you meant to be, you know, fixed on a mark? And it's good that you address that. This, you know, it's a case of reading the signs when you're there, you know, looking down, seeing,
I
all right,
mean,
it could be.
there's so many things that can help you initially locate the fish. I mean, it's really tough to carry on session after session. You're getting up before the light comes up. You're going out. You get into a mark, and you spend, I don't know, 1-2 hours maybe. I wouldn't spend much more than that personally. It can get a bit, you know, you can get a bit disheartened if you're not catching. But if you have a few blank sessions, you just kind of, you have to think about what's gone wrong or what's gone right in those. Personally, you know, you're looking for the things that are going to show where the fish are going to be. You're looking for the structure. You're using the tides to your advantage, how you think they might affect the mark. And also, I find time of day is crucial. You know, people, uh, the bass are going to feed no matter what. They're going to feed during the day, bright light. They're going to feed, you know, during storms and that on the beaches. But I think we can increase our chances massively heading out first light just before dawn and just in the first kind of hour or so into the sunrise, and likewise for the evening. I've found sometimes that I've gone out to a mark, I've been straight into the fish before first light, and in some places I've caught, you know, upwards of 10 bass, and as soon as the light comes up and hits the water, the switch is off, and you could have arrived just at that point thinking it was going to be great and you're going to catch, and they've gone, they've turned off. So it's a tough old game that we're in, and it's when you start kind of seeing patterns, and seeing kind of similarities in what you're doing, that's when it really pays off. And for me, nothing's been more important really than keeping a diary about it.
Really just kind of documenting everything that you kind of witness and everything you've experienced, and then kind of using that in advantage, kind of reviewing that, and, you know, adjusting what you're going to do the next time you go out accordingly.
Yeah, I found it can even, this year for example, I wrote down in the diary last year, I think it was the 15th of May. You know, there was a crazy morning of bass. I just had non-stop action, and it was on just coming off big spring tides, and yeah, it was the same conditions. You know, you write down the conditions, you write down everything that you think might be helpful to, you know, clarity of the water, what else were you catching, that sort of thing. And I had 2 days, you know, almost 3 days apart, kind of year after year, almost 3 days difference where the conditions were the same and the bass showed up, they were present. Now that's like, you know, you could use that to your advantage. It's no way a certain thing, just like with anything in fishing, but it helps massively. I've found it gives you confidence, and it gives you something to relate back on, something else that no one else has. It's your own private information. You know, you get to know the marks, and then you get the fish. It's as simple as that, really.
Really, that's really interesting. I've never even thought about something like that. I think especially for me, seeing as like it's very inconsistent when I get to go down. It's very kind of here, there, every day. You know, it's not, for me, it's not on a regular basis, but I feel like people who might be based near the coast could use that in their advantage. And yeah, as you said, it's building up your own sort of information and being able to kind of use that to maximize your chances. You kind of touched on a few things there when you were saying like, what you were kind of documenting. But you mentioned tides, you mentioned weather. How much would you say kind of the tides go into your kind of planning for your fishing? And is it a set thing? Is it like, oh, you want to fish, I've always heard the thing 2 hours before high tide and then when it turns, or what's your kind of opinion on tides affecting it?
I think, I don't know, as you get more into the bass angling, you can obsess for hours on end about wind directions, about tides, how big the tides are, everything. And I found that they all help. Big tides can often bring in more food for the fish, but it can also make it so the tide is actually too strong for them to swim in the places where you're usually catching them when the tide isn't as strong. But I use kind of as much of that as I can to kind of help yourself out, kind of into initially finding the fish and the structure really. But it is hard. I mean, like I say, you can kind of obsess about it for hours, and different marks will fish at different states of the tide. And even the same mark will produce fish, at different states as well. I've always just found that I've never let it put me off too much. I haven't let it control, the way that if I go out or not. Obviously, there are some conditions, that you think it's not going to happen, or it's not going to happen as well. But you're going to catch more fish with your rod, out there than sitting on the sofa. So I'd say, if it's safe and you're confident, just go out there, have a go. Don't let, other people say, that mark only fishes, at this state of tide. Go out and check it for yourself, because, either people won't want you to fish it, or they might have, conflicting information. So yeah, go out and find out for yourself.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great thing you've just covered there. I think for me, especially, and other people hopefully can relate to this, when you've got to travel an hour, 2 hours plus to reach a spot and reach a mark, sometimes you can get almost anxious looking at the weather, looking at the tides, and think, oh, I'm not gonna reach it by high tide, and you get so kind of bunged down in those aspects of it. It kind of puts you off the fact of just going there and chucking a lure in the water. As you said, you're not going to catch on your sofa, so just get down there and get out there, which is definitely something. Hopefully,
I've had plenty of times where the mark that I thought there was going to be the place where I was going to catch that, the big fish, that was completely blown out, and there's no way that I'm going to be fishing directly into a 30 mile an hour headwind with my line getting blown everywhere, not feeling the lure or anything. So I completely wiped that idea clean, and then I just moved to another spot, somewhere where I thought all I was going to get was pollock. But if you don't have a good start to the day of your session, you might just choose to go, catch a few pollock for the last couple of hours or something like that. But I moved, and I just started fishing it. You start fishing more confidently once you're settled, and I started catching bass, and never thought that bass would be present in this area. And by the end of it, I had an awesome session catching bass, and a couple of pollock alongside it. But it was one of those moments where you do think, I could have gone home, I could have packed it up, could have called it a day. But it's just staying out there, and confidence is key. Whether it's confidence in your lure or it's confidence in yourself, it's just keep carrying on. And I'd just advise, if you can do shorter sessions to a stretch of water and get to know it more, and that's when you're going to start catching the fish, I reckon.
And not kind of changing it up every session, kind of learning maybe a stretch of coast and like kind of how the marks are on it, and how the tides affect it, and anything else you can pick up on. And then from there you can kind of let the day decide where you're going to go, and at least the marks along that location. If it's a stretch of coast that quite well, then you can really tack it with your kind of best kind of knowledge about it. I feel like a big part of the thing that I've been doing wrong personally is I've kind of gone to a spot, not had anything, not seen anything, and think, okay, now I need to go try somewhere else, like completely the other side of a mile or two down the road or something like that. It's kind of, I think, sticking at a space and really getting to know it is crucial. But yeah, another thing that I think would be important to talk about is kind of location. Obviously, it's a huge part of bass angling, but how would you go about finding new marks? And, you know, what is your go-to for finding new marks? Are you going to sit on, you know, Google Maps, look at kind of like the view of it from there first, or you the sort of person that will just head down, you know, sometimes maybe without a rod and just go check out a mark, you know, and find some new spots?
Yeah, I mean, quite often I'm out, you know, taking dogs for a walk and stuff on the cliffs and all that. Anyway, very, you know, again, very lucky to live where I do. And I'll look at a stretch, and you know, you'll think, you know, that looks good. I use Google Earth. I think all of us do. You know, it's a massive resource to be able to go have a look at it, and to check out the, you know, the stretches of coast that you might want to go to. But there was something that's always stuck with me from like the old boys in fishing, and they just, you know, a big spring low tide, you just head out, you head out to a stretch that you might like to go check out, and you just walk it, and you're looking for those gullies, you're looking for potential tidal rips that are going to work their way around the rock gullies to bring food in and out of them. You know, bass are elusive, but they are definitely out there. You know, I had a day the other morning where I was out on a headland. It was completely still, and the bass wouldn't take anything. You know, you could try the most subtle approach, and I saw shoals of them swimming around. And you know, sometimes they're going to want to feed, sometimes they're not, and that's when you know, you may not catch them. You might see them, but you won't catch them. So I think, you know, choosing structure that's going to help draw the fish in, that's massively important. Again, the tides, some places might fish well just as the tides finish dropping. I've had that on a few spots. It's not an ideal state that people would say to fish. A lot of people think that, you know, bass like the flood, they'll follow the tide in, but equally they'll wait for, you know, all the sea life to kind of retreat to the open sea as well, and they'll hit it then. You're going to, you know, lose a lot of tackle in these places initially, because likely you're not going to be buying expensive plugs and that for spinning. You might be using metal spinners, or you know, like you said, sidewinder sand eel imitations and stuff like that. The ground is going to be super snaggy. I like really skinny water, probably about 6 to 10 foot, and it's just a case of, you know, just carry on cast, check out an area. If you want to chop and change, you know, that works as well. But there's so much you can go into really with the sort of territory bass going to hang out in.
No, definitely. I think, yeah, no, really good that you kind of mentioned that. I think where what you mentioned there, where sometimes the bass aren't feeding, I've experienced that firsthand. I got recommended a spot actually very close to home, and went down there, and it was right where a kind of river, or I don't know, it wasn't a big river mouth, I'll put it that way. It's a very kind of narrow river mouth, and I kind of went to that spot there, and I'd experienced something that I'd never been that close to anything before in my life. It was about 2 foot in front of me. There was little silverfish top in. There was a school of mackerel absolutely hammering it, and I could see the bass fins, you know, the spikes along the top of them, just kind of breaking the surface of the water while they were kind of just nailing at this bait fish. And I was putting lures at it, and I just couldn't seem to take it. And you know, it makes you really, it kind of crushes your kind of self-esteem around the topic. You're like, oh my God, like what was I doing wrong? But as you said, sometimes they're not feeding. And I feel like it doesn't help sometimes when you put an alert right next to a school of real fish, which kind of is like a, you know, spot the difference kind of thing for them. But yeah, no, sometimes you've just got to take it on the chin. If they're not feeding, and just, you know, go home, you know, kind of recharge and go out again with a different approach.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's heartbreaking when you're sight fishing for bass and they're not taking anything. And you know, there's loads of really good articles. There was one in Sea Angler this month that's just gone about a soft approach for bass when it's completely still water. The clarity is like, you know, we call it gin clear. When you've got super clear water and the fish they're still feeding, but they're going to inspect whatever lure that you throw at them, like with a fine tooth comb. So, you know, presentation as well is massive in kind of situations like that. But you kind of get a feeling for locations that are they feel bassy. You know, people start saying that, you know, this place looks bassy. It's got shallow water. It's got a lot of movement in the water. And I've tried to always find a bit of fizz. A little bit of kind of movement in the water encourages the fish to kind of move about more freely and to feed a bit more. But I find first light for me as well is key.
Would you say if there was one thing that you could give someone, a new angler getting into the sport of bass angling, one golden rule, would you say it's the first light? Would you say that's the golden rule you could give someone who's starting out?
I would say, I'd say first light or in the evening. I mean, and that's, again, it's not to say that if you go down to the pier during the middle of the day and you hammer out some lures or hammer out some feathers, you won't pick stuff up. I'm sure you will. But for me, if you want to go after specifically, let's say, bass in an area, or, you know, you're trying something out for the first time, doing a sunrise kind of mission or a sunset mission, just as that light is dropping, it's a well-known fact that when the light levels drop, the fish are more confident. They'll either come out of where they are or they'll arrive to an area to start feeding. It's a natural thing that happens. With lots of other animals. As soon as that light drops, everything feels a bit safer for things to come out, and they start preying on each other. And that's what we're doing, isn't it? We're just casting something out into the sea, into the massive sea, and hoping that something takes a liking to it and gives us a hit. Personally, at the moment, I'm favouring Japanese long distance metals. So Nomura 40 grams with a single assist hook. I'm just hammering these lures out. Doesn't take anything, no effort really to blast these out. You can reel them in so many different ways, and in that I'm searching huge amounts of water, places where I haven't been before, and I'm hooking up on, especially when the season has started and you're not trying to be too subtle. I'm hooking up loads of different things and some really good quality fish. So that's all you can do to give yourself the best chance, really.
Yeah, one thing I really wanted to talk to you about, which sounds a bit crazy when I've asked you to come in here talking about bass angling, but I'm just fascinated by some of the other kind of bycatches you have when angling. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? I've seen you hook into, garfish, huge wrasse. I've seen a picture of you holding a sand eel that looked bigger than some of the fish that I've ever caught. So talk about some of the other things you come across on your trip.
Well, that's kind of how it goes when you're fishing for bass. That with these lures and things like that, especially the metals that work at different depths, you're going to pick up pretty much, if you use the right hooks and different sizes, you'll pick up pretty much all of the species that are going to take a liking to attacking another smaller fish. Like you say, I've caught launts as long as my arm that have been feeding on sand eels. Catch big garfish that will chase the lure on the surface, and they'll actually break the water chasing after it, and we get some pretty big garfish down here. I catch a lot of wrasse on metals, which on the online forums and stuff, people are kind of a bit shocked at, because a lot of the time people use kind of really delicate weedless rigs and Texas rigs to catch wrasse and kind of bump them through the kelp beds.
I've witnessed that firsthand. Literally last weekend, tried that for a bit, and it's just no joy at all.
It's tough. It's a tough one. Wrassing and stuff like that. People are moving to that way of fishing for them with these like Texas rigs and soft jellies and stuff like that. But I find that I never catch small wrasse. I'll usually catch, each time it's usually a personal best for me. I don't tend to weigh the fish, but I'll measure them. And I've had some really big wrasse, ones that I'd never expect to catch. And I think that because I'm hammering a lure over their heads, wrasse are said to be really territorial. They'll hang around their particular site, their boulders. They'll hang around that and not move more than a couple of meters away from it. And so I think when they see something going over their head enough, they just get a bit tired of it and they'll hit it. And from that, I've had, you see the page, I've had some seriously big Ballon wrasse and stuff like that. And yeah, I'm after specimen bass. I think if we're in the sport for catching them, we're all after a double figure bass. Which, if you're lure fishing, as the bass get bigger, they get warier. They want to expend less energy, so they're not so prone to chasing your lure. Most big bass are usually caught by bait. But seeing as that's not something I'm going to be doing, it's just one of those goals. You're just going to keep on trying for it.
Would you ever try live baiting? Have you ever tried it, or would you ever try it?
Yeah, I have tried it before, and used to have loads of success with it. People rate it as one of the best ways to catch, a decent specimen bass and just, a decent specimen fish in general. You're not going to get a better bait presentation than, throwing out a live bait. But I think for me, it seems like it's becoming a bit cruel. I If I can, I'm catch and release. So I feel the same way about the bait. I don't really want to chop bait up to be throwing it out, and yeah, I kind of want to return as many of the fish as I can, and yeah, that's kind of the way that I'm going with it now.
Definitely. I think it's something I struggled with. I kind of, the first few times I went out targeting bass on a boat, was with some family friends who were all about, there was a guy in the marina who had basically a sand eel kind of like bucket sort of thing, which kind of in, and yeah, he was selling live sand eel. And I think that's one of the first time I saw a bass get caught was off a live sand eel. And obviously when you're young, I was under 10, great excitement, it's, just to have a fish on the bank or on the boat is just like, it just absolutely, it's just like one of the best parts of the day sort of thing. But I remember it was always something I felt a little bit off hooking up a live bait, and I'm in the same boat as you in that way. I couldn't really have the same, I can't say, oh, I'm a catch and release fisherman when I'm like, maybe killing a couple sand eel just to, get that catch and release, so yeah, I think it's a big shift. It's definitely nowhere near as popular as lure fishing. I think there's something just as rewarding of almost kind of, it sounds really bad when you say it like this, but outsmarting a fish with, a lure, and you kind of using the way you presented the lure to really attract the bite. And, there's something so much more rewarding when you do that with a plastic, and than if you're checking out a real fish in front of them. It's kind of like it's almost like a cheat lure fishing way. But
yeah, since we've all started using braid on our reels, and since we've got super sensitive rods and everything like that, the level of contact and actual participation in the sport in lure fishing at the moment is massive. We're using those where we can tap them along the bottom through currents, and we're feeling everything. We're feeling rocks, we're feeling the weed, and the takes that you get off an aggressive bass that's going after your lure is just, it's next to none. The amount of contact that you actually have, and the amount of feeling. I used to sit out on a beach, a couple of years back, bassing in the winter, just trying to tell the difference between thumping waves that were crashing against it compared to, you catch a couple of good bass, that's for sure. Like, and people love that, sitting out on beaches, bassing and stuff like that. But the level of contact, and like you say, you do feel like you're trying to outsmart the fish. You're throwing this tiny lure, what is it, only 5-10 centimeters long. You're blasting that out into the ocean, and you're using the knowledge that you've put together. You're using what you reckon could be the best conditions and tackle to catch these fish. And when it all starts going well for you, when you start realizing what's happening, realizing where the fish are, you stop wasting as much time on sessions where it might not be worth it, especially in one spot where it's not going to work. And then you start fishing more efficiently, and then your hookup increases. You stop losing your lures. It doesn't cost you as much money, and you meet more people who are doing it. And there really is such a strong community. Not just in Cornwall. I talked to guys in Guernsey who are doing lots of lure fishing, and
Guernsey looks mental for the bass angling. Oh my god, they have it amazing over there, because I feel like the water's a lot less pressured over there as well. I feel like
I mean, I think I look at their Instagram pages and they're catching bass, I mean, a good month or so before I am. And there's, I mean, that's the thing with lure fishing as well. I mean, I go through long periods where bass is what I'm after, but I'll catch everything apart from that. And it also it gives me a good idea if they're around or not, because I'll be catching, like you say, massive sand eels or just pollock or mackerel, through the early part of the season, and it's like the bass just know when they're going to turn up, and they're back on the scene, and yeah.
Amazing. The last thing I want to touch on is lure choice and kind of I think a lot of people will be looking for a answer from you. So you'd say, put this lure on your rod, you will catch fish. And I know it's not as simple as that. And you've already kind of stated that, metal lures are something you're swaying towards like more now. What would you kind of suggest for a kind of startup bass angler who's just kind of looking to get a little bit more, kind of a little bit better success rate, and they know they're fishing very likely spots, but what would you recommend for a good kind of starting place for lures?
Well, basically, I'd kind of break it down into like the classic three. I'd have my metal casting lures, whether that's just your standard Dexter wedge that we all started spinning with, up to, like I say, the Nomura 40-gram umis, which are just, it's like a lead pencil. I'll go for all natural colors, whether you want to go dark or light, that depends on the conditions, but all natural colors. And I would just go with a really strong mustard single hook. They sell really good inline ones now, and they're made basically for replacing that treble. I crush the barbs on it as well, because I'm really into the catch and release. So that means I can easily unhook the fish. And trebles are good if you want to keep them for the pot, but treble hooks usually tear up fish pretty bad. So I avoid those. And then second category would be just your soft plastics. If you don't want to spend loads of money, you've got your sidewinders. Anything that's going to give you a bit of weight. They don't cast brilliantly, so you're not going to cover a huge amount of water with them, but you will catch some bass at your feet if they're there. And the fish minnows, the black minnows, they are, they're pretty hot. Everyone kind of rates them as one of the good soft plastics, and I've had really good takes off them. I just find that the bodies don't last long. If you're catching wrasse, they'll chew them to pieces, but you can catch some really good quality fish, especially some bigger bass in a tidal current. If you're sweeping a little weedless fish minnow, it's really good presentation, and you get some really good hits off it. And I suppose the final one, which I don't use as much as I used to, just because I never used to really catch as much on them, is just your hardlers, your plugs and your poppers sort of thing. I have a few select ones that I've had for ages, and I've had a few catches on them, but it's all about confidence for me in lure fishing. And if I stick something on, and in the back of my head I've got a little bit of worry about it, it can play hugely into your session that day. And if you don't think it's going to catch fish, to be honest, you probably aren't going to catch anything on it. So I think I'm as guilty as a lot of anglers are. I've got boxes and boxes full of hard lures that basically caught me more than the fish. Like, I wanted to buy them because that's something to do during lockdown. That was something to do just because you had a bit of time and you went on the internet, you started seeing these glitzy plugs. Some people rate them. Personally, I think you've got some of them that will just be fish catchers for people, but I've got lures that people wouldn't think of that do really well for me. And I think all this put together, at the end of the day, you could throw in a hook with a bit of tinfoil on, and if the bass are feeding aggressively and hard, they'll hit anything that lands in the water. Obviously that's oversimplified, but that's what lure fishing is. You're trying to get an instinct out of the fish to take that bite and to hook up.
Perfect, mate. Honestly, you've covered everything and more that I wish to have covered in this. I feel like hopefully this gives some people a little bit more guidance for getting out there. And that's kind of the main goal of it. I'm really looking to kind of build on online community with this. And I know I'm going to cover a couple other species in future podcasts, but I feel like this is a really good beginner advice for anyone who's picking up bass angling for the first time, and also hopefully a couple, you know, more experienced anglers, you know, learn something from this as well. For like a big thing for me, definitely, you know, your advice around the spots and not being bunged down with the kind of time of day. Well, not the time of day, but you know, how the tides affect it. Kind of just get out there a bit more and try it out. I think this summer I'm really going to put some time in and try and have a couple, but you never know. There's no guarantees with it. It's a bass angling at the end of the day.
Well, that's it. Yeah, if fishing was easy, they call it catching, isn't it? So yeah, it's just getting out there, building up your own knowledge. You know, it's great. I never fished with a club personally, but I understand lots of people get a lot from out of that. You know, just going down to your tackle shop, talking to people, online forums, it's getting a lot less insular. Like people aren't holding on to marks, they're not holding on to, people will still protect, you know, their knowledge and stuff like that, but we're all up for talking about, you know, how we get started and how we get into it. It's changing a lot, and yeah, we're getting a lot of positive, you know, people helping each other out and just wanting to, you know, for one, preserve the bass fishing that we have in this country. That's for me number one. You know, we want to save the sport that we have, so that, you know, people can get into it and enjoy where we live. So yeah, it's massively important.
No, amazing, man. Thank you so much for jumping on the kind of podcast today. And I really hope kind of people, you know, have heard about what we talk about now, give your page a follow, because there really are some cracking catches on there. And yeah, you know, one thing that I really like you've done with your page is you've kept it that you're very open with the kind of conditions and, you know, what sort of tide affected it. And I feel like there's something to learn from pretty much every post you put out. So I definitely recommend people giving you a follow. And yeah, just thanks again for jumping on the podcast, mate.